Hello, this is James Himm Mitchell, and I'm here with your weekly Lenormand Outlook. I'm going retro, going old school, and I'm going back to my line of 5 when I started doing the Lenormand reading videos. I always chose a line of 5 before I kind of evolved or allowed it to morph into the Lenormand and Tarot Tag Team. But I woke up feeling kind of retro today, feeling kind of old school. So I'm going with the line of 5 for this week. And the deck that we are using for this week's reading is one of my favorites in my collection. And it is the Wanderwust Lenormand. And it's created by Wandering Oracle. So I will post a link to his site so you can get more information about the deck if you find that it speaks to you after having experienced it in a reading. So again, this is the Wanderwust Lenormand by Wandering Oracle. And I've taken the liberty of shuffling, cutting, fanning out the cards, and picking our 5 cards for the line this week. And so for those of you who are no stranger to my videos, you know that I always start with the center card because it represents the focus for the week. So having asked the question, what do we need to know in terms of possibilities or potentials for the week ahead? The center card is the stars. And so for me, the stars is a card of guidance and direction. And if you look at it, the star here almost looks like a compass. And so that's where I get it, because it looks like there are compass points here. So that's where I get the meaning of guidance and direction, because that is what the function of a compass does. It not only tells you where you are, but it also shows you where you might need to be moving into in terms of direction. So another meaning for the stars for me is about inspiration. So this week we could be looking at what are the things that inspire us? What are the things that we aspire to? What are the things that we hope and wish for? Those are all things that would fall in line with the stars. To be a little more mundane, the stars for me can also represent things like electricity. So I always see it as, you know, an online or internet card. So it could be that there may be a source of inspiration or guidance that comes to us through the internet, which is probably the most popular way that things kind of come to us in terms of guidance. So that's the stars. And the last thing that I want to say about this card, you know, I talked about the mundane thing. So bringing it up to a higher level or a spiritual level, the stars can represent things like the metaphysical, the spiritual, the universe, so things of that nature. So in terms of inspiration, it could be maybe some form of inspiration or guidance comes through a more metaphysical channel, or it's of a more metaphysical nature, having to deal with things like, for me, the stars represents things like prophecy, divination, things like that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be those particular things, but for me, and remember, I always read the cards in relation to me. So when you're listening to these messages, you have to ask yourself, how would that apply to me based on what's being presented to me? So you might not have a metaphysical bent, you might not be into divination, but if you're watching this video, then on some level you are. But if you're not into it per se to the depth or the level that I'm at, being a card reader, then it could just be what form of metaphysical material might speak to you this week. So those are all the things that I would ascribe to the stars. So let's take a look at the other cards, because the other cards will give us more meaning to the focus. So starting from left to right, on the outer left we have the whip. And so the whip for me is a card that represents repetition, because it's the idea of repeated activity. For me, I always look at it as trying to either work something out or sort something out. So this week, in terms of guidance and direction and inspiration, it could be, what is it that we are needing to work out or sort through that's going to help bring us to a place of greater clarity, greater direction, greater guidance. So I'm looking at that. The other thing about the whip for me is that this card can represent on a negative side or a challenging side, being in a place where we're beating ourselves up. So it could be in terms of guidance or direction, we may be, if we're not clear on where we're going, we may be beating ourselves up for where we're at, or for beating ourselves up for, making choices that's gotten us to where we are. And that really is not helpful. You have to ask yourself, if you're in that space of beating yourself up, ask yourself, what are you getting out of that? What is that really accomplishing? As a person who's been known to do that, to myself, I offer you that question for your consideration. The last thing about the whip for me, it can represent discipline. The idea of beating yourself up, that could be like punishing yourself. But sometimes discipline can be a positive thing, like, picking up a routine or engaging in a process going to allow you to become more disciplined. So what is it that you're beating yourself up for? And then maybe looking at that and how can you allow that space that you're in to be something that allows you to become more disciplined. It's kind of doing a reframe around it and making it, instead of like being a victim and feeling sorry for yourself, how can you empower yourself to make that something that becomes a discipline that makes you stronger for it rather than weaker because you've gone through it. So that's the whip for me. The next card in the line is the Sun. Okay, now the Sun is the best card in the deck. So I always like seeing the Sun, and it tends to outshine all the other cards. So the negative aspect of the whip that I just talked about is kind of being outshined by the Sun. The Sun is a card that represents success and confidence. For me, it represents things like illumination and enlightenment. So that's the Sun, very positive card. And so now looking to the cards that are on the right side of the stars, we have the first card is the Anchor. And so for me, the Anchor represents things like stability and security. It can represent one's work. A lot of Lenormand readers will look at this as a work-related card. And going with that, it's work that has become one's livelihood. In terms of work, the Anchor can represent something that's routine. Again, going with the idea of something being stable and secure. So that's where that comes in. Sometimes I see the Anchor as we are being advised, going with the idea of inspired or guided with the star, being guided to stick with something. It's about perseverance. It's about not giving up. In that regard, the Anchor is also known as a hope card, playing off the idea of the stars being wishes and hopes. Same thing with the Anchor. The Anchor represents hope in that regard. So how can we develop a routine going? It fits nicely with the whip. How can we develop some kind of routine that we can stick with? That allows us to become successful and build our confidence, going with the Sun. So that's what I'm seeing with the Anchor. And then the final card in the line is the Lady. Okay, so now when the Lady comes in, for those of you who are watching this video who happen to be female, then the Lady represents you, because in Lenormand, she traditionally represents a woman. So this would be directly related to or directly connected to all you women who are watching the video. Now, for me being male, this could represent a woman that I know, a woman close to me. So if you're a male watching this, then this would represent a woman close to you. And so the other cards usually inform or give us more description about the woman, because the Lady card just represents a woman. So now, as you know, what I do is Lenormand is best read in pairs and triplets. So I start with looking at the pairs in the center that are flanking the star to offer us some guidance in terms of giving us more information about the direction, things of that nature. So we have the Sun and the Anchor. So reading the pair, it could be confidence or success, going with the Sun, with work, with the Anchor, because I said the Anchor was a work-related card for me. Now, I also see the Sun as a time of day card. So for the sun, this would be, you know, either something daily or something in the morning, because that's when the sun is usually up. So going with that, it could be a daily routine, and also creating a daily routine in which leads to success. So a daily routine that leads to success. So I'm seeing that with the pair of the sun and the anchor. So the next pair would be the outer cards. And so we have the whip and the lady. And so looking at that, I'm reading it as a woman facing conflict or strife, because that's another aspect of the whip that I didn't touch on, would be conflict and strife. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I'm looking, if I put the cards like this, I'm looking and seeing that the lady is facing the whip. So it's directly in front of her, it's directly in her line of vision. So I tend to see things as like, that's something the person is facing, it's something that's coming up in the future for that person, because anything that's in front of us can represent the future. So keep that in mind as I'm saying some of the things that are coming to me in the moment. So again, I said a woman facing conflict or strife. A woman seeks discipline, again, because it's directly in front of her, so she's seeing it. So she seeks some form of discipline. A woman is beating herself up, trying to work things out or sort something out, because again, the whip is in front of her. And then to describe the woman, because sometimes the cards that are connected to the lady are used to describe her. So going with the idea that the whip is about conflict, strife, it can also be about arguments and debates and heated words being exchanged, things of that nature. Then it could be an argumentative woman, or an argument with a woman. So I'm seeing those as possible meanings for the pair of the whip and the lady. And then the next pair would be looking at the whip and the sun. And so going with that, we could read the pair as discipline that becomes successful, because remember I said the idea of, you know, building a discipline before, you know, and that only becomes through daily routine, going with the anchor. So I'm seeing this as a discipline that becomes successful, or a discipline that leads to confidence, going with the other meaning of the sun. So I'm seeing that with this pair. And going with that, I'm looking at the idea of discipline with the whip, and that sometimes can also represent things like working out. So the idea of discipline and working out, that could lead to the idea of maybe somebody watching this video might be either training, you know, getting some sort of exercise, some sort of training. Could also be somebody whose work, going with the anchor being the work card here, being a personal trainer. Somebody does that professionally. And then having said that, if that is the case, then the stars could be, you know, the idea of like, how can someone doing that work become a guru? Because I sometimes see the stars as someone who's like a guru, somebody who is inspiring other people. So I also see the stars as, for me, in my background, my work, going with the anchor, it can represent life coaching. So it could be like somebody who is a personal trainer now is in a position of becoming a coach to either other trainers or, you know, taking that to the next level. But even with that, the idea of exercise carries with it the idea of discipline, and the discipline leading to being successful and becoming more confident. But then the anchor throws in that extra curve about making that discipline part of your daily routine. That's the only way you can be successful. Success has to become a habit. It has to become a part of your everyday routine. So I'm seeing that. So then the other pair we have the anchor and the lady. And so that could be read as the possibility of the livelihood or the work of a woman, a hardworking or serious woman, because again, she's facing that, so it would be some way of describing her. And sometimes in that regard, the anchor can be about being hardworking and being serious. And the other thing I could say here would be about the routine of a woman. So those would be some of the things I would see with the pair of the anchor and the lady. And so we could also look at the cards that are next to the center card. So we have the sun and the stars. So going with the idea that I said that the stars could represent something online, then the pair could be read as online success, or being inspired to succeed, or being inspired to become more confident, or inspiration that creates a sense of more confidence. It could also be with the idea that the sun represents things like daily and morning. It could be daily inspiration or daily guidance. So I'm seeing those with the sun and the stars. And then on the other side, we have the stars and the anchor. So I'm seeing that as the possibility of routine, going with the anchor, inspiration or guidance, inspiration, guidance or direction, going with the stars, for work or livelihood. And then the last thing I'm seeing is, the inspiration to stick with something and to persevere. So I'm seeing that with the stars and the anchor. And so if you're no stranger to my video, one of the techniques I like to do is called the hidden dynamics. And I've been doing it with the lines of 3, but it's really great when you have a line of 5, because what you do is, this is where we turn to the playing cards that are inserted on the Lenormand cards. And so going with that, we have, for the outer pips, we have the Jack of Clubs and the Ace of Spades. So we take the Jack, which is valued at 11, and then the Ace, which is 1, and we look to the card that represents a total of those two numbers. So 11 and 1 is 12. And so the 12th card in the deck is the birds. And so the birds is a card that represents communication and conversation. And so it could be that this source of inspiration we may receive, going with the idea that it relates to the dynamics cards, relates to the focus card. So this source of inspiration could come as a result of, a conversation. It could come as a result of a phone call. That's one of my favorite meanings for the birds, is actually a phone call. So it could be like that mode of communication or conversation. Typically, the birds represents anything that's spoken. So the inspiration or guidance could come from, listening to a speaker. So it could be like you're led to go to a lecture, or you listen to an audio, or you watch a video in which someone is actually speaking. It's anything for me with the birds that you actually have to hear. So I'm seeing that. And then what we do for the inner cards, we look at the Ace of Diamonds, and we have the 9 of Spades on the anchor. So 1 plus 9 is 10. And so the 10th card in the deck is the Scythe. So the Scythe is a card that represents something sudden. Here it is. It represents something sudden, something quick, something abrupt. It can also represent, being divided. So going with the idea that the whip represents conflict and strife, then this card can represent being divided about something. Okay, and the Scythe can also represent, in terms of the focus being guidance, direction, advice. It could be, if we're getting guidance, it may be guidance that we need to take a swift course of action, or we need to move quickly on, because the Scythe can represent something that's fast, something that's quick, and something that we have to do swiftly. So it can represent a swift course of action. It could also represent sudden inspiration or sudden guidance, which means that it comes quickly. It just comes out of nowhere, because the other thing about the Scythe, it represents something unexpected. So I'm seeing that. So it could be, with the the pair of the birds and the scythe, it could represent, again, a quick conversation, a short conversation, a conversation that the person gets right to the point. It could also be, and I'm always saying this when I see the scythe connected to the birds, it's about the idea of, getting to the point, a conversation that's, abbreviated, it's short, it's concise, and it may be a little bit blunt. So we have to keep in mind that when we're engaging in conversation, that making sure that we are not cutting people off, that we're allowing them to say what it is they need to say. But also, too, on the other side of that is like, being mindful of the conversation being tangential, going all over the place, going off topic, not really making a point. But I'm seeing this in terms of the stars being inspiration and guidance. I'm seeing this as maybe the guidance coming suddenly, quickly, unexpectedly. And as a result of that, if we're being led to do something, it may be something that we need to do sooner rather than later. So I'm seeing that. The other thing we can do with the playing cards is add them all across. And so we have, I said with the jack, that's 11. The ace is 1. The stars has the 6 of hearts, so that's 6. Then we have the 9 of spades, it's 9. And 1 again, because we have the ace of spades with the lady. And that gives us 28. So the 28th card in the deck, and this is interesting because it is the gentleman. And so now that brings us fellas into the reading. Whereas the lady, I said, referred to the women watching the video, or if you were a man, it represented a woman close to you. Now, this is the opposite. So if you're a woman watching this, then it could be that the person that we're talking about in between the birds and the scythe is a man. So it could be, and now that I place the card above the stars, it could be a man who offers us this inspiration, this guidance, this communication, this inspiration that kind of gets us moving. It could be like this person who I consider to be like the personal trainer or the guru or the life coach is actually male. So I'm seeing that. So it's very interesting. So again, if you're a woman, this may be a man who you get to have this experience with or through. And if you are a man watching this, then you could be in the position of offering that inspiration or guidance to a woman close to you. So having said that, and then the last thing I like to do with my line of 5 is I take the numbers, because I always say Lenormand has 3 features. It has a central image, it has a playing card association, and then it has the number. So I take the numbers and I add them together and to create what I call like the essence or the final advice or the bottom line of the reading. So we have 11 with the whip, we have 31 with the sun, we have 16 with the stars, we have 35 with the anchor, and 29 with the lady. And so that brings us to a total of 122. And so in the Lenormand deck, there's only 36 cards. So when I get a number over 36, I take the digits and I add them together to reduce to a number between 1 and 36. And so taking 122, you add the 1, the 2, and the 2, it gives us a total of 5. And so the 5th card in the deck is the tree. And the tree is a wonderful card in this regard. I'm going to put it right here for a moment. The tree is a card that represents health and healing. So it's a wonderful nod to the idea that I was talking about in terms of exercise and the personal trainer and things of that nature, because that would represent health. So in that regard, we may be asking is, look, what's going to inspire us? What's going to motivate us to take better care of ourselves in terms of our overall health and well-being? Because that's what the tree represents for me. Now, in terms of work, it could also represent going with the idea that if you notice there's no mistakes, I put the tree over the stars. And remember, I said the stars could represent something metaphysical. So going with the metaphysical, then the tree can represent the idea of being a healer. So someone whose work is, in healing. So, one of the things that I do in my own personal practice, I'm a Reiki practitioner, and so I offer that as a service to my clients. So that could be me, because now keeping in line with the man or the gentleman being above these two cards in terms of placement, that could be a man who actually, is an energy healer, so that would fit for me. That could be one of the ways that I inspire and motivate people. So I'm seeing that. So the other thing about the tree for me, it represents personal and spiritual growth. So this idea of inspiration and guidance and direction, it could be, what is it that we're seeking that's going to become or part of our spiritual and personal growth. Everything really, going with the whole idea of the metaphysical aspect of the reading, everything really is designed for our personal and spiritual growth. So it could be like the focus for this week is in terms of the inspiration and guidance and the direction. It could be the direct result, or what's underlying that could be, your own personal and spiritual growth. And then the last thing I want to say about the tree, wrapping things up, is that the tree represents, in terms of growth and development, it represents being patient, because the tree represents something that takes time. So I always look at it as like the roots are there, but it represents something that is going to be an ongoing process and which is going to require patience. So that is the tree. So wrapping things up or summing things up with the cards, again, we have the whip. The whip is all about trying to work things out, trying to sort things out. It can represent, if you've been beating yourself up, how can you do a reframe around that and allow that to be something that allows you to become more disciplined, and it actually empowers you to take some course of action. Then the sun. The sun is all about confidence and success. So how can we create some sort of discipline that allows us to become more confident with ourselves, that allows us to become successful, that allows us to become more enlightened and illumined, and then the focus, the stars, of course, is all about what is it that's going to inspire us? What guidance are we seeking? What direction are we moving in? And what are going to be the things that's going to help us become more clear on those things? The anchor could represent, what kind of routine do we need to develop on a daily basis that's going to help us become more successful? Because the idea here is that success has to become a habit. It has to become a part of our everyday routine. The idea here is if you're beating yourself up for something that you've done in the past, then the anchor is offering you hope. It says, don't give up, stick with it. Sometimes we in this day and age expect things to take off, or we have to get it right the first time out, and that might not be the case. The case here might be you might need to dust yourself off, pick yourself back up, and try again. And then the last card in the line is the lady. So if you're watching this and you happen to be a woman, this might be directly related to you, and if you are a man watching this, then this would be a woman close to you. And then you could ask yourself, with the gentleman, how can you support her? How can you help her? How can you support her, keep her inspired as she moves forward? So this has been the Lenormand Weekly Outlook. I am James Himm Mitchell, and I look forward to sharing this space here with you again in our next video. And until then, I hope you have an awesome week, and take care.